say it's not my opinion, it's not belief systems, it's not dogma, it's not guidelines, it's what is your body trying to tell us.
Dr. Carolyn Harris, how did you find Carnivore?
Great question, right at the get-going. I suppose I started off, I'll take a jump back. I'm a GP of 34 years here in Adelaide, South Australia, and I have a son with epilepsy. And so I suppose I've always just followed the standard line of evidence-based medicine, guideline-based, protocol-focused medicine. And I suppose I found with my son, nothing was working. So he has refractory epilepsy. We'd probably tried maybe 12 different medications and seen maybe 4 or 5 different neurologists here in South Australia. Nothing was working. And so then somebody suggested keto. And I was like, oh, okay, keto diet, isn't that a fad diet? And I really didn't understand it. And so I kind of then looked deeper and kind of went, oh my God, it has the potential to change the biochemistry of the brain. Wait, what? And why didn't anybody tell me this right at the beginning of this story when I was asking the questions of why does my son have epilepsy? Have I done something to cause this? Can the brain restore itself? How do I do the best thing for my son? So then, of course, you kind of do the deep dive into learning about the brain. And I was doing that alongside being a traditional general practitioner, which was incredibly challenging because it doesn't take long sort of going down the keto path where people, even the dietitians at the Women's and Children's Hospital and the Children's Hospital in Victoria that we were kind of interfacing with, were saying things like, well, of course we need to worry about his cholesterol and his heart disease as well. This is like a 12-year-old child and with terrible epilepsy, catastrophic epilepsy is described by some people. And they're starting to worry me about what am I doing in terms of his heart disease. And so, of course, I was incredibly confused and I needed to learn more and more and more. So thankfully, I found Georgia Ede, Christopher Palmer, started reading their books, deep diving into trying to understand the metabolic side of brain health. And then, of course, mitochondrial health. And so I suppose once you kind of go into the keto world, you then kind of realize, actually, if that doesn't work, maybe there's something that could take you that next step further. And that's where I learned about Carnivore. And of course, I had the likes of the brilliant low-carb community here in Australia, Paul Mason, Peter Bruckner, Nicole Moore, the dietitian who I worked with for 10 years, who was basically showing me that she could transform people with fatty liver. Within 2 weeks, she could just turn them around. And I was like, that's phenomenal. She couldn't tell me it because I was a doctor. Of course, you can't tell a doctor anything. But she showed me. Very gently, she said, this is what the hemoglobin A1Cs are at one point, and then, 2 to 3 months later, she showed me that she'd dropped their hemoglobin A1Cs in the case of type 2 diabetics. And so I was very lucky to be swimming in the same pond as her, and she was influencing me just in a very easy, calm way, showing me what can be done. And I suppose just, unfortunately, it probably took me about 10 years to get from low carb, keto into carnivore. But what the carnivore journey taught me was, oh my God, the benefits when it comes to mental health, because I'd never experienced calmness in my own mind. I just assumed that anxiety was part of life. Anxiety is your brain's, it's the function of your brain is to actually look into the environment and try and work out where the threats exist. And so I was telling everybody, oh, anxiety is just normal. It's just part of your brain's job and it's okay. Until I was about maybe 6 weeks into trialing Carnivore, thanks to sort of Georgia Eads' influence, really. And I realised wonder had returned. And it was like I was standing in the shower and I was just looking at the water thinking, isn't that beautiful? I wasn't tripping out on any drugs or anything. And I thought, oh my God. And I realised that a calmness had kind of descended on my brain. And I hadn't realised that I hadn't probably ever experienced that in my life. It took me back to being a child and lying down on your back and looking up at the clouds. But even as a child, I grew up in America, which means that I grew up on rice bubbles is a healthy breakfast. And, during holidays, you might get things like, cornflakes and Fruit Loops and Pop-Tarts and and all the donuts, and McDonald's was there. That was part of our everyday life. And so I'm not sure that I had ever experienced a proper human diet, a proper human appropriate diet, as a lot of the people in the carnivore community are now describing it. And so once wonder and joy returned, it was like, oh my goodness, it's so empowering to be able to have that feeling and then share that with others. So if others are curious enough to kind of come along on that journey and try it. But I say to everybody now, as a GP, I would prefer to experience things, try things out on myself first before I then recommend it to other people. So things like infrared therapy, I find really profound and incredibly healing. Again, tried it on myself before I started recommending it because I felt like I owe it to my patients. I respect my patients that much that if they trust me, then I actually want to demonstrate that I'm trustworthy. That's kind of what I want from my neurologist. When I see a neurologist, I want to be able to trust that they will be looking after my son in the same way that I would want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Just to move to your son firstly, is he doing carnivore? Is he doing keto? And how has that changed his epilepsy?
Really good questions. He's living in supported living at the moment, and he has the most amazing group of support workers looking after him. They're people that I believe he would choose. He's pretty well nonverbal. But it's interesting. It's taught me a whole new world of how to communicate. I understand, of course, any parent would say they understand what their child is trying to tell them, sort of thing. And a lot of that is nonverbal. He, because of his intellectual disability, it is very challenging, and he is carb addicted, as are most of us. But we have the support workers pretty well providing, I would say, keto carnivore, and we're tweaking all the time. He definitely does better when he's, I suppose, running mostly on clean foods. Definitely paleo, but it's very hard to get him to eat, to tell you the truth, and he will go long periods kind of without eating much at all. And so I have to be very careful. He gets recurrent infections as well. and we're running infrared in the background in his room now, and I'm just constantly trying to tweak things. I can't say he's strictly carnivore. I'm not sure that he would choose to have me prick his fingers all the time. He's 22 now, and so I believe he has the right to, as much as I can provide informed consent, I would be pretty sure that he wouldn't want me to prick his fingers and see if he's in ketosis. He'd probably hit me if I tried, actually. So I try and do my best to give him the best quality life, or me and my family, me and my husband. And I'm really grateful for the team of support workers that he's got. And I have to take them along the journey as we go. And they're incredibly good at providing the care. And I'll have to say, as everybody knows, it's not just about the food. It's about, I suppose, it's about the quality of life that you've got. And I think him being surrounded by the people that he's surrounded with at the moment, his team of support workers is actually giving him, hopefully as much as really good quality diet as well, because he is thriving. I'd have to say he's happy. And it's really lovely to see, because he has had long periods of time where he's been really quite unwell and ended up in hospital a lot. And I don't want that for him. To me, hospitals are really, they're quite hostile environments for Liam. That sort of degree of sensory overload, the bright lights, the people that he doesn't know, the noises, they're not good places for him. They're not healthy places for him. We'll use them if we need to. But at the moment, we've been out of hospital now for probably 2 years. And so that's really good.
Yeah, I can understand in the hospital environment. It's very intimidating, especially when anytime. It's not even about age, right? Just going into that very clinical environment and finding out you're not in any way in control of anything anymore. And it's like you're just being told what to do and being stuck with things and pricked with things,
It's a really good point. And I think it's really difficult as a doctor. I've been in that position where, say in an emergency department, you're part of an echo chamber of doctors, like somebody will come in and they'll say, "Oh, I've seen an FLK, funny looking kid, and they had a very challenging or difficult parent." So these layers of labeling that occur sort of within the medical system without people even realizing that they're doing it. And they're not doing it out of malice, but they don't realize how difficult it has been for that patient, that parent, to actually front up and say, "We need help." And so I suppose I really struggle with the whole compliance when doctors label patients as compliant or non-compliant. It's like saying, if you don't follow the advice that I give you, which is, I don't know, God-given or whatever, passed down to you, from all my wisdom and knowledge of 6 years of medical school and everything, if you're not going to follow that advice, then I'm going to label you as non-compliant. And yet nobody's sort of stopping and thinking, why is it that this is not the right pathway for this person? And in what way can I build a bridge to try and make sure that I am meeting their needs? Because to just be labelled non-compliant, difficult, is not actually helping that person. So sorry, you've kind of something that's actually challenging.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because it's almost like an attitude of like, you don't understand this advice I'm giving you. I spent a lot of money on those textbooks and that education to be able to get that. But there's no real appreciation that there's humans on the other side of that conversation, you know.
That's exactly right. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point that I can articulate clearly the confusion that it generates. And I think it's a confusion that a lot of people have sort of when they're becoming consumers of the medical system, because you want to be compliant. You want to do what that doctor tells you because you want to believe that that's going to work. I look at my experience as being, it was like being turfed out of the lifeboats. The last time that I saw a neurologist, where we actually had to take Liam to Melbourne. He has a brilliant neurologist there. She's fabulous. But the last time we saw her, his behaviour was out of control. But to me, that was just saying that his anxiety was incredibly high. We'd taken him probably without his consent, we'd put him on a plane, we'd taken him somewhere that was completely foreign to him, and to see a team of people. So it was me and my husband, and surrounded by a team of the neurologist and all of their team of helpers. And Liam was just so out of sorts. He was escalated, he was hitting, he was pinching. And so the neurologist said, well, why did you take him off of his risperidone? Why did you take him off of his Epilepsy? I'm like, well, I didn't take him off. I just reduced it because it hadn't worked in high doses, hadn't worked in low doses. We've been using it for 15 years now. I've tried every different combination. It's still not working. And she just said, well, she called a psychiatrist. What are the options? Put him back on it. And I'm like, what it does is it actually takes away his quality of life. And I don't think I have the God-given right to do that to my 22-year-old son. I actually think that my job as a parent, and I think most parents get this, my job is to actually maintain his spark. You can see in somebody's face when things are meeting their needs and when things aren't. You can see the light. And it's interesting. We notice that without even realizing, without being able to articulate it. We notice it when we talk to other people, their spark, something that makes us feel good in their presence. And I notice when I'm giving my son medications that remove his spark, I notice it. And so I don't believe I have that right.
Yeah. So on your journey, what is it that for you realize, well, I have to stay this way. I have to continue this way of eating going forward. There's no way I can go back.
Thank you. I love the fact that you're clarifying for me. Families don't do medicine individually. The system that we have set up is assuming that one person has a problem, they come and see a doctor and they fix the problem. Families do medicine together. Communities do health together. So I am Liam's advocate. I am the person that I'd take a bullet for my son. I would do anything to help him. But just like, how when you get on an aeroplane and they give you the little spiel at the beginning and they say, if the oxygen masks drops down, apply it to your face before you apply it to any of your people in your care. That's how I see my role. And it's taken me a long time to sort of be able to find words for that, but I need to stay healthy. I think without even realizing it, I need to not just stay healthy, but I need to stay cognitively clear in order to be able to advocate for Liam and for my other sons. I have another 3 sons as well. I needed to make my brain work as well as it could work, and that's what Carnivore gives me. And I've tried going into carnivore and then coming out of it and seeing how that goes. But what I found is that when I need to be as clear as possible, when I need no fear in my life, that's when I return to carnivore and I feel strong, I feel focused, I feel alert, I feel calm. I feel everything in my body just settles. And that's a gift. And that's how I know that I can do the best for Liam. So even if I can't bring Liam to the carnivore camp without screaming and kicking and everything, at least then I know that I can do the best to just provide stability, a good foundation for him.
Yeah, it's interesting you put it like that, because one of the things that I've found the most powerful about my journey is that on carnivore, it gives me this kind of mental state where I'm able to, where I'd normally have been involved in the fray of a conversation or an argument or something like that. It's enabled me to be in a position where I can kind of, maybe not physically, but mentally step back and kind of look at the whole situation and be dispassionate about it and argue in a way that I'm most likely to be making kind of logical sense and not being emotional and that kind of thing.
I so agree. And I think I'd have to say thank you to you and other people that I met at the Carnivore Collective, people that have been brave enough to, I suppose, talk about it and show, I suppose, the empowerment that they have found, because then it just allows others to feel confident to give it a go. I mean, the first time I heard Anthony Chaffee talk Plants Trying to Kill Us was at a low carb conference here in Australia, and it was like, what? But you listen to it and it makes sense, because I'd heard about, lectins and oxalates and all of these things, and it just absolutely made so much sense. And then, of course, I met Olaf Sorensen, who's my personal trainer, or I call him the exercise scientist, and he's been carnivore for 10 years. And so it's kind of like, well, you see these people, and of course, Georgia E talks about it as part of, how to help people with mental health conditions, and you just kind of go, well, all right, if it's working for them, I'll give it a go. Yeah.
It's great, and mentioning the Carnivore Collective in Adelaide. For me, the amazing thing about that is 400 people could all be in the one room together and completely just understand each other without explanation. It was awesome. There's no justification required. No, why don't you eat vegetables? None of this kind of thing. It was just everyone understands each other.
And the resonance and the energy, and it's like, again, it's like you can't describe it. So the more time I spend investigating, researching, reading about mitochondria, the more I'm interested, the more curious I am about the questions of, I follow Douglas Wallace and now, Max Gilhane with all of his interviewing, and speaking with Jeffrey Guy recently about, the way of the future, the research of the future. It is mitochondria, as far as I'm concerned. And I just felt that there was a resonance in that room. It was like it was like the sensation of being in a choir where you're just kind of singing in tune, and it just felt right. And I just have to give a big shout out to Melissa B for making that happen.
Yeah, it was no small feat to pull it all together in the time that she did, and yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So regarding your practice, do you talk about carnivore with your patients in your practice at all?
I talk about it now. I say I dropped the carnivore seed early now. And I do that because it took me 10 years to get there. And I did it very cautiously. And I did it, I suppose, with a great deal of fear, because I felt like I was an explorer in an unknown world. Even though there were brilliant people, around the world talking about not just carnivore, but low carb and paleo and just better eating, better living, optimizing health. But it is really quite difficult to do it within the constraints of general practice. And a lot of the general practice um, here in Australia, you're kind of being driven to practice very quickly, get people in and out, because the costs are going up and it's just getting harder and harder to be able to meet the Medicare requirements in a set amount of time in order to be able to run the general practice business. So I've opted to do long consults so that I can first of all just listen to how my patients have actually gone about problem solving themselves first, and where they've gotten to in terms of putting the pieces of their puzzle together, in order for me to be able to come in and work alongside them. So long consults, and I'll talk about food. I'll talk about food alongside a whole heap of other lifestyle tweaks or changes, and just kind of recognize that there are some people that talking food is incredibly anxiety inducing, but I will almost always just ask them if they'd accept hearing my story, because I just invite them into that space. I don't want to assume that they want to hear my story, but I'll just say it's taken me a long time to get to this point. But if I can help you get there faster, that would be my goal. And it's just merely an invitation, but it's an invitation back into wonder, joy, curiosity, calmness, understanding health from the perspective of your biology. And so then I'll kind of use things like biomarkers. So I say it's not my opinion, it's not belief systems, it's not dogma, it's not guidelines, it's what is your body trying to tell us, and what would we need to do in order to meet your body's requirements. And that can be a step-by-step sort of process. But I will drop the carnivore seed early just to breach that sort of, as there is this if you are interested. And then I've now got all of these different options of being able to refer people to other people's stories, like what you're doing, what Bart's doing, Natalie West, Anthony Chafee, Bella, Bradley, Anthony, everybody kind of pulling together the stories that just, the Healing Humanity trailer. I'm telling everybody to check out that now, because I think people's stories are incredibly powerful. If one person can heal themselves, then maybe you can heal yourself. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. When you hear some advice from a person, be it a doctor or a teacher or someone with with a level of authority, we often, because we hear those messages often throughout our lives, we can kind of go, yeah, well, that's what you're telling me, but it's not as easy as that in practice and all that kind of thing. But then when you go out and you can see hundreds and hundreds of stories of people all basically saying the same thing, then you go, oh, okay, well, so maybe this is something I should try.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm,
There's power in community, isn't there? But then there's the power
right.
in the individual story as well. And when that all comes
Definitely.
together, it's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
So your patients must be pretty happy, especially when they first come to you and they go, wow, this is a bit different. A doctor that listens to me and will talk for an extended period of time and actually cares. This is unusual.
Well, I'd like to think so, but I don't assume that that's the case always, because we have probably 400 years now of expectations that when you go to the doctor, they will just fix you. And you'll leave with something in your hand called a script that has a magic bullet in it, and that magic bullet's going to fix you. And so I do, I find it really challenging, I suppose, in particular because I'm very interested in brain health and I understand things like the ADHD medications. And the ADHD diagnosis now is just, skyrocketing. Everybody's getting a diagnosis of ADHD. But then many of the people really want the drugs. They really want the stimulants. And it's like, okay, we could try the stimulants, but I suppose I would hope that they would also listen to some of the advice that I have, that actually once you get onto an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication or an ADHD medication or a medication to help you sleep or a medication for anything, pain, whatever, it's actually really difficult to get off the medications. And I suppose I like to go into it with the, I suppose, plan of, would you like to take this for a short period of time and then we will get you off of it, so that there's the always the advice around restoration of health rather than just treatment. I suppose what I've seen with treatment is that treatment over the years, standard treatment, doesn't reverse the metabolic process that's driving the underlying disease process. So we have to talk restoration.
Yeah, I really like hearing that because that feels to me like the way doctoring seemed to be when I was a child, that it's been lost now because now it's just like, oh, just come back to me when you need a new script rather than, well, let's set expectations that you want to be aiming towards getting off this thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm,
And often those
yeah.
those conversations aren't had. And it's really, I'd have to say, it's because I have a son who is now trapped in the system. So when I say that, I have to take him to see a doctor regularly to get his scripts filled. And every time, so he's moved recently and we had to go and see some new general practitioners in the area that he's moved to. And explaining to them why he's on cannabidiol. Now, cannabidiol is a well accepted medication for refractory epilepsy. It's been accepted for probably hundreds of years, but there's really good evidence in the last 10 to 20 years, particularly internationally. It's a good drug. It's a safe drug. It's better than almost every other of his anti-epileptic medications because of the safety profile. But explaining that to a general practitioner who goes, "Oh, isn't that medicinal cannabis? Hold on, I don't prescribe medicinal cannabis." So immediately you've got this block of judgment. And then they're assuming that you're a drug seeker. It's like, well, actually, my son has refractory epilepsy. Do you understand refractory epilepsy? Because not many people do. Actually, even the neurologist can't tell me why epilepsy occurs. And so I'm trapped in a system now in order to get my son his medications. I don't want to be.
That's terrible. I mean, one of the things that you kind of are meant to associate with doctors is having some level of bedside manner, and a doctor to have almost zero empathy and just be reacting to something that quickly is pretty bad.
Yeah, but I would say it's unfortunately it's relatively common now. I wish it wasn't. I've had some absolutely brilliant doctors for Liam, particularly the GPs. Fantastic. But when one of the GPs is away or whatever, and you get another GP, just the immediate judgment that occurs. So, and because they're judging me, and like I'll go in and I'll try and make it easy for them so that they can get me in and out really quickly. But then they're also making assumptions about that situation. It's very hard to be a good, compliant patient, let me tell you that.
It's almost like it's it's almost like the doctor kind of wins both ways, like it's they're always going to be able to blame the patient in some way.
Absolutely. It's like a club. And I suppose I was part of that club. I am part of that club, but because that club made me feel that they didn't think my son worthy of their doing any additional research around his condition, or worthy of their time. It hit this spot inside me, which is the mama bear, that where you feel the need to protect. And again, it's very hard to articulate that because it was just a feeling. It was a feeling of this person is a threat because they couldn't see my son as worthy. And it's really, I think a lot of people who have refractory epilepsy, or a lot of people who have kids with refractory epilepsy, actually understand that that's occurring. You are feeling that you are challenging them in some way. You're just challenging their knowledge because nobody actually understands it. But I can tell you that the people who understand it best are those who are motivated to come up with some way of restoring health within that person. So that's why I'm just constantly researching. I want to know more about brains. I want to know more about epilepsy. And I want to go beyond the traditional, where the research is occurring right now. They are all into the genetic side of things. So my son does have a genetic form of epilepsy. But my understanding is that mitochondria actually determine whether a gene gets expressed or not. And so I actually think that the mitochondrial research is what we need in the field of refractory epilepsy.
And do you think that that amount of research is not going to happen until they work out whether they can treat it with drugs or something? Is it?
Well, I've seen just recently acetazolamide has been refloated as a drug for refractory epilepsy, in particular in the case of my son's CHD2 gene. But that's Diamox, and it's used for cerebral edema. People who go climbing Mount Everest take Diamox to basically stop themselves getting cerebral edema. It's like, why? Why is it that it works for refractory epilepsy and it works for treating cerebral edema? Can somebody explain that to me? And so it seems to me that it's going to have something to do with hydration and electrolytes. But then, okay, so if it works, that would be great. But again, is there a way of restoring that situation?
Yeah, but there's less money into looking at those kind of things, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So how about the rest of your family? Are they kind of following this approach to eating?
Well, they are starting, yeah. So my oldest son was kind of, he's gone through the whole healthy, going to the gym sort of approach. And so when he was 18, doing his trade of being an electrician, he was basically eating chicken breasts and broccoli. And at that point in time, so that was over 10 years ago, I was like, oh, don't you need more plants? And, that's probably not very healthy. But so he was kind of an early adopter. And luckily, I have learnt that my sons are actually my greatest teachers. And so I suppose around about the same time that he started to do that, that's when I really dropped the carbs as well. And so he's definitely invested in optimizing his health. And the others are also very highly intelligent people, and they are now, they've just got some CGMs. They're interested in seeing what's happening in terms of CGMs, and they're asking me about seed oils. You can't force people to do anything. And so the way I see things is that you be the example. You do it, you see what impact it has on you, and then you're in a position to be able to advise other people. And so definitely I've definitely restored my metabolic health. I'm not insulin resistant anymore. As when I was starting to go through menopause sort of 20 years ago, it was like, God, that collision of metabolic syndrome and menopause, just diabolical. And you just think your world's ending and that you're going absolutely crazy. But then, yeah, I suppose so. I started sort of then, and then my kids have kind of watched, and they're asking questions now. I'm so grateful.
And yeah, even if they decide, I'm not doing this diet stuff now, I'm going out to enjoy myself, whatever it is, at least the seeds are planted now, so that, you know, they always have that resource there if they feel they need it, right?
Absolutely. Of course, they think I'm crazy in many ways, but that's my job as a mum. I want to remain. I want to remain somebody who's prepared to have fun, try different things, be curious, always sort of pushing limits of exploring things. And so I think that's really healthy. And I'm so grateful that they're prepared to actually try different things.
So Carolyn, how can people reach out to you if they want to get in contact? Do you have a website or any other way of getting in contact?
I really need to set up a website, don't I? I'm working out of Thrive Family Practice at the moment, which is Glenelg South. And I'm very happy to take on new patients, particularly people who are exploring carnivore, because I believe that together we're all learning, and we're learning how to do it well. And I know, I suppose I've started asking different questions now as well, like energy levels, mood levels, quality of sleep. I mean, all things that I've always kind of used, but kind of inadvertently used, rather than just blood pressure and weight and biomarkers. It's like, we know we're heading in the right direction if your energy is improving. We know we're heading in the right direction if your moods are better this week than they were last week. Yeah. So sorry, back to reaching out to me. Yes, Thrive Family Practice. and I will set up a website.
Yeah, no worries. So I'll link to Thrive Family Practice below. Um, Dr. Carolyn Harris, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. It's just been such a pleasure.